All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first virtual clinic webinar session for volleyball. We are excited to have Jeremy Wiggins from Florida Professional Officials Association here with us tonight. He will be speaking on dealing with upset coaches and parents. Going to go over a few little ground rules, I guess, so to speak. As attendees for this session, you are muted already. Your videos are off, so you don't have to worry about that. If you have any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A box there at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the chat box, whichever is preferable to you. We do plan to have a Q&A session at the end, so if they don't get answered during the session, we will address it at the end. Also, these are just best practices that FPO uses in their area. They're coming on sharing ideas, so don't please don't take this as you must use them or these are the only things that work. They're just sharing ideas with what works in their area. So please just take this as a best practice. If you want to try to incorporate them in your area, feel free to do that. But what Jeremy is sharing with us tonight, it's not the end all say all for dealing with upset coaches and parents for the state of Florida. So with that being said, Robbie Lindeman is also with us tonight, the director of volleyball. Robbie, you have anything you want to say before we turn it over to Jeremy?
Just a couple quick things. I just want to thank Jeremy Wiggins for taking the time out of his busy schedule in helping us create our first volleyball webinar from the FHSA. I also want to commend Jeremy Hernandez, Taylor Geis, and Frank Beasley for pretty much creating these Zoom meetings for our staff to get out to our officials and to get the word out for these webinars and these trainings. Want to thank all of our attendees for joining us tonight as we look forward to hearing what Jeremy Wiggins from FPOA has to say. Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll be here to assist. All right, man. Thanks.
All right, no problem. Thanks, Robbie. Hi there, everyone. Like Robbie and Jeremy have said, my name is Jeremy Wiggins. I'm with Florida Professional Officials. We go by FPO, and we're located in Central Florida. So we service schools around the Orlando area as well as in some of the surrounding area as well. Like they said, yeah, keep in mind, guys, this is some of the things that I use when I'm dealing with upset parents and coaches, as well as things to prevent dealing with upset parent and coaches, trying to make sure, match goes as smooth as possible. Some of these things might work for you. Some of them might not. When I was learning, I was given many tips that when I tried them, just with my personality, the way I delivered them, didn't work as well as other officials. So definitely take that with a grain of salt, try and incorporate them, think on them, just trying to get you sparked and thinking on, how to deal with these coaches and getting out of situations and preventing to get into situations. So really, without further ado, we will kind of jump right in to, let's see, there we go. So where I think it's best to start with when we're going to be talking about dealing with parents and coaches, first, it's important to recognize what our place is in the match, in my opinion. So if we're going to be dealing with people and we are in a position of authority, it's important to recognize what our role is in that match. The way I like to describe our role is we're there to facilitate a match. We're not the final source of authority in all matters in that gym. Yes, when it comes to rules and rule interpretation, we have the say and we have the control, but remember, there are many things involved that we aren't in charge of. The administrators still hold a lot of authority in these events as well. So recognize what we're trying to do is provide an environment of competition and sportsmanship for everybody involved in the match, the coaches, the players, as well as the spectators. We're trying to make sure things go smoothly as possible in that gym and that the players can play a game in a way that is natural for them and they're not having to deal with unnecessary outside distractions or things that are hostile that aren't really part of the environment we're trying to foster. One thing I always heard when I started officiating was we're the officials, we're the third team in the gym. There's the two teams on the court with their coaches and we're the third team, and we have to work within our group of four, or 7 if you're counting your folks on the table, and we're in competition too. I've never really liked this third team analogy because it implies that there's some level of competition or some sense that we can win when we're going up against these coaches we're interacting with and the players as well. We're here to facilitate. Like I said, we're not in a win situation. Our win is if the match goes smoothly and, all of that, but it doesn't have to do with trying to control the teams and anything like that. So to me, we're facilitators there to do a mission. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody where I'm trying to come from there. Then as we continue to get to the situation, we're going to be working with our parents, working with our coaches. Having the right mindset for success is important. I always think as I'm going into the situation, me and my partner on a typical, weeknight when we're going to a gym, we don't have official line judges from our association there. The scorers table is provided by the host team as well. So me and my partner are the only impartial people in that gym. Everybody else there is wearing a colored shirt. Everybody else there has a team they came to see or a person they came to see. They have some impartial take on the game. And to me, that's important to always remember because we know that we're going to be making unpopular decisions throughout the night. We're going to call doubles. Someone's not going to like those. We're going to be calling nets. We're going to be assessing unsportsmanlike conduct violations. And people are going to react to that because we're going against the team they're rooting for and the things they're hoping to see. And we need to know that we have to remain impartial. We have to remain biased. And just because they have a strong reaction doesn't mean that we need to have one in turn. I was told a lot when I started my officiating career, you don't want to have rabbit ears. If you've never heard what this means, or even if you have, what it means to me is you don't want to get overly sensitive to everything you heard. Like I said, we're going to make some unpopular calls. You go up, you call a double, people in the crowd start chirping, come on, ref, that's crazy. That's too tight. Oh, I can't believe you're calling that. How'd you miss that double over there? All kinds of things going back at you. You want to make sure you're doing your best to not let those things rattle you. You're going to hear a lot of comments. You don't want to listen to them. If you try and pay attention to the will of every crowd and every coach and every player, you're never going to be able to set a level of judgment and a level of consistency to officiate a good match. So you don't want to absorb all those comments and wear them on your sleeve. At the same time, you do need to pay attention to what's being said, because if you completely tune out every voice coming from that gym, you're going to miss when comments become unsportsmanlike or they become hostile to the court or to the players. And when people start going after players, whether it's players at each other, people from the crowd saying things they shouldn't, we have student sections that are filled with minors at a lot of our games if we're blessed to have a good crowd that night. And we want to make sure that nobody is abusing players on the court. Nobody's saying anything. I know if you go to a college match, student sections might yell something a little bit harsher than what we allow, but I like to tell my officials, we're officiating minors. So we have a duty to make sure those minors have a safe environment. It's very different than what you might hear at a college level match, if it's a football game or a volleyball match. So don't listen too much to the stuff directed at you, but make sure you're listening to everything coming from the crowd. Also, be ready to take action as you hear these things before your emotions arise. When I started officiating, I did not know when I needed to take action on things that coaches said or that spectators said. Where was my line? I was really hesitant, and that led me down some bad paths. One comment that finally got through to me, and I've tried to tell newer officials as I have been training, is you need to card before you are emotionally compromised, or you need to warn coaches before you're emotionally compromised. If you wait until your blood is boiling and they're under your skin, or you're just completely nervous and rattled by the comments that are being made to you or just in that gym, then you have done a disservice to yourself in the match, because once your blood's boiling, you're not going to be able to officiate your best game. Your judgment's going to be clouded. So if you start hearing things that are going to start affecting you in that way, take some action before you get there. Let the coach know, hey, that's unacceptable. We got to stop. If they don't, go on and start issuing sanctions. There's no point that's too early to sanction if it warrants it. I've been a part of postseason matches where we've given yellow cards within the first 6 rallies. So, it sounds punitive, but if that's what it takes for you to stay calm and officiate the match and the behavior truly warrants it, be prepared to do that. All right, so we'll jump right into our subject matter now. Opposite of the title, dealing with upset coaches and parents, I like to deal with the parents first. The parents section, to me, is the easier section to deal with, and I'll talk to you about why. So first, we're going to talk about how you deal with parents pre-match. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is best practices to keep people from getting upset. I will talk about some scenarios I've personally been a part of, where things have gotten upset or tempers have gotten high. But first, we're going to try and approach it from a way to not let things get that high. As you go into a gym, let's recognize the authority that we have over spectators and acknowledge what that is. If you recall from your rule book, we have authority over match participants. That's your coaches, your players, assistant coaches, trainers if they're sitting on the bench, people are on your scorers table. But spectators are not match participants. We can't sanction them. We cannot card them. We cannot really do much about them. Spectators fall under the purview of our school administrator. So if we have an issue with what's going on in the stand, it's not our job to come off the stand and try and remove them. That's not our place. We don't have that authority at all. We have to rely on our administrator. So the first thing I do when I walk into a volleyball match, I walk over to the table. If I have to change, so I'm coming from work, I'm already changed when I go into the gym, so I'm in uniform, and I greet my coaches. And if I don't know the administrator of that gym, I ask my head coach of the host school, where is my administrator? I need to speak with them. I want to get a personal relationship so we can talk about my expectations for the match, what I tolerate, what I want to see happening, and get a feel from them. You can have a large student section. Is this a rivalry game? Is it a district match? Are there things that could put tempers on edge? The more you know, the better off you're going to be officiating here. So once I've met my administrator, we've gone over ground issues. At this point, we're working up to the match. If I start seeing things that I know aren't allowed, then I'm going to address them. If I am hearing music being played that has vulgarity in it, I'll ask my administrator to please, play some clean soundtracks. Again, we're dealing with minors. We have an environment. We want to set the tone for the behavior we want, which is no swearing on the court from our players, right? Or from our coaches. If I see noisemakers, rattles, vuvuzelas, anything that's artificial, bullhorns in the stands, seen all that, get with your administrator and say, hey, that is not allowed. It's going to need to be gone by match time. Make sure they know and make sure they take action. If you see flash photography, if, really anything is going on, you see the student section already singling out players from the other school by name or by number, go on, have your administrator address it pre-match. If you can solve it then, it's one less thing you hopefully have to worry about mid-match. So now we're reaching the point where mid-match, our match is rolling on. So we're dealing with parents here. We have minor issues and major issues that can come from them. To define some of your minor issues, this could be flash photography. This could be some minor comments where, the student section is calling out a player's number after they've, just hit the ball in the net or missed a serve, or calling them by name if they've Googled the roster because Max Preps has it all on there. Kind of minor issues. There's nothing intentionally malicious, hostile, or overly unsportsmanlike. You really have two ways by the book. Technically, you should get your administrator for everything, but I don't like to create large unnecessary delays. So if the student section's right behind me, the flash is right there, and I'm on the stand as the R1, I might turn around really quick and just say a reminder, hey, please no flash photography. Guys, no names, no numbers to the student section. One quick comment, and I'm not even going to wait for a reply. I'm going to turn back around and jump into the game, hoping that we got that corrected right there. Obviously, if that didn't work, I've got to get my administrator involved and solve that problem and keep rolling through. Any major issues, even on the first offense, there's a lot of profanity coming from the student section. They're hostile, they're grabbing the volleyball when it goes into the stands and chucking it onto the court or throwing it at someone. We got to get the administrator. Like I said, we don't have the authority over them, so we need to get our administrator involved. 99 times out of 100, when I've had to bring my administrator in because of something like this, they've gotten it handled. They're proud of their school and their reputation. They don't want to see things go south. If you work at my association, you may have heard the story. I have developed a reputation over the years. I have at one point had an administrator remove an entire student section because that's what they felt was necessary to do what I was looking for. They wanted to be helpful. I had students singling out players on the team by number. I requested they stop to the administrator, and they said, well, I can't just kick one kid. I'll have to send them all. I simply told the administrator, look, if I hear it again, I'm going to wave over to you, and that means I expect you to solve the problem. If you feel that that's removing an entire student section, so be it. Sure enough, 3 rallies later, kid stepped out of the stand, points at the libero, says, libero, you suck. Gave a wave to my administrator, had a brief 5-minute delay while they removed the student section. Whatever you have to do, I love having students. They're a great part of the game. I love having parents, but we want to make sure they're not affecting the team. In that case, my team was definitely rattled. I had the captain at my stand the whole time asking about them. Anything you can do, obviously, to avoid situations like that, definitely the best. Probably got Robbie and Jeremy cringing off their screen that I just talked about, though, and the whole student section, because I'm sure they'd hear about that. One of the biggest things that you want to avoid is dealing with angry spectators. If you've been around officiating long enough, you've dealt with a parent or somebody that really isn't happy with the way you've officiated and they have some comments for you. We're at a brief disadvantage as volleyball officials, and the fact that we're in a gym. We have no barrier between us and the parents. The bleachers end on the court, and there's nothing except maybe, depending on your gym, 6 feet to 10 feet from your stand to where the spectators are. So throughout my career, I've had parents go up to say something to me at the stand, whether it was a question because their daughter's a freshman and they're trying to learn the game, or they have a comment about my officiating. There's a really dangerous situation because you don't know what people are going to do when they're angry. Folks who officiate soccer, lacrosse, football have a big advantage because their spectators are in stands behind a fence. So what I always tell my new officials is, think about this, guys. If someone jumps out of the stand and runs onto a football field to make a comment to the official because they really don't like the way they're calling the game, that person is going to be escorted out of there by an administrator, if not a police officer, for doing so because of fear of assault. So if you have an angry parent come up to your stand, don't engage them on the subject matter they're talking about. Whatever the situation is, instruct them, ma'am, you need to leave my stand right now. We can't have this conversation. It's inappropriate. Start waving to your administrator to get them over. Hopefully they're paying attention and they're coming to protect you already. I've had to remind a gentleman before of my football field example, and he stopped for a second and said, sir, you're exactly right. Have a good night. And he walked away. People aren't coming from a place 9 times out of 10 where they're meaning you any ill will, but we just got to make sure we don't get to that spot. So set your boundaries, know them, make sure you're following through them with the game. So post-match, this is where you get a lot of parents, they've been yelling at you all match, making their comments about your officiating, what they think about it, whether they're quoting the rules right or they're quoting the rules wrong. As a volleyball official, we know that oftentimes they don't understand all of our rules because there's a lot that happen behind the scenes that they're missing on. So talk to your administrator if you foresee any bad attitudes or potential. If you've been getting hollered at for 4 sets and you're going into the 5th set, I brought my administrator over many times, said, look, when this is done, as we're getting to the end, can you come across to my side, walk me back across the court? We're going to get with my partner and we're going to leave right away. And please walk us to our car. It's just not a great environment. Yeah, maybe you don't like the perception of hiding behind somebody here, but it's for your safety. It's for the right thing to do here than be accosted or something. Make sure that administrator is there because they are the ones who can actually have effect on the parents that really matters in here. It's always tempting. People say we've had long days at work where we're coming from. We get frustrated after 5 sets of listening to these parents harp on us all night. It's tempting sometimes to want to retort back to them or give them a comment, but it's a no-win situation here if we try and do that, guys. I'll give you an example. This was actually pre-me officiating. I heard it from the people who trained me. Some good friends of mine in officiating. They were officiating a boys semifinal match that was on location. Parent was on the R1 all night about what he thought. At the end of the game, as the R1's coming off the stand, he's there to greet the R1, giving him some more. The R1 rips his patch off because at the time we didn't have them sewn on the shirts. They were magneted or Velcroed on. And he said, hey, let's go out in the parking lot if you want to deal with this. Not what you want to do. There is no win for that. The guy got what he wanted. He got a rise out of you. He's able to report you to the school, report you to the FHSAA. The school might bar him from stuff, but you potentially just lost your employability as a contractor because, we can't have that, at least in FPO, as I can say, we don't want to see that happening. So remember, keep your calm, work through things as you can. You've got the authority. They're just trying to get under your skin here, and we want to make sure that's not happening. So Robbie, Jeremy, this is really the comments I had on parents at this point. Have we gotten any questions in the chat? Anything you'd like me to add or address right now as we're talking about parents before we move on to dealing with coaches?
Yeah, we had one from Jessica. What about having fans moved from playable area? Do you address or rely on school administrators?
So that's a good question. So typically what I'm assuming you're asking is a lot of times with matches, schools or officials will not want players on that first row of seats to where they're standing on a playable surface for room. Every gym's different. We have some shoe boxes here in Central Florida, and we have some cathedrals. In my shoe boxes, I will take that approach. If I see a large student section, I'll get with my administrator and I'll say, hey, can we ask them to move off the front row? If it's a packed house, you have that problem too, where we don't have room to move them and we have to work with it. So I'll remind people, hey, you've got to stay here. You can't come forward. If I'm in one of the cathedral style gyms where I've got 35 feet between the stands and the court, I might allow them still to sit there. I would say use your judgment on that. If you're having a lot of kids wanting to run forward, especially in celebration on points, absolutely try and get them pushed up. But if you're seeing an issue, definitely address that. That's a great point to bring up, Jessica. Good point. So to me, that's a judgment call based on the night, based on the gym, and based on the participants that we have.
We had one more question from Thomas. What if an assistant athletic director comes up to the stand at a timeout questioning your calls?
So if an assistant athletic, that's a great question. I'm trying to think if I've been in this situation or what's happened to it. If I've really got them questioning what's going on, we've had this with one of our officials here where the official is doing some things that in review should not have been happening. And the athletic director was no longer comfortable with the official. You've got a call here. First, my question, their assistant athletic director, are they the administrator on duty that night, or is there another one? If they're at a point where you're not feeling safe because of the comments they're making, anything like that, ask to have them removed. You can let your administrator know whether it's them or not that, hey, I don't feel that you're providing a safe environment to me. I'm here to officiate this. You can refer, here's my supervisor, make your comments to him, but, I can't have you influencing my match call. If it's a question of, they don't feel like you should be on the stand from a standpoint of interacting with the players, which is a point I've had to address with my association. If they're telling you, hey, I need you to leave, I don't feel that I'm comfortable having you in my gym anymore, remind them that if they choose to do that, they're forfeiting as the home team and they can appeal that to the FHSA. But for the most part, I would remind them you need your space, your ability to officiate, refer them to your assigner, your president of your association, let them know they can reach out to these guys, Robbie and Jeremy with the FHSA if they're having concerns, but they really can't get into your business with this. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, guys, Jeremy and Robbie?
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not able to handle it or there's bigger problems of it, I mean, obviously you revert back and let us know immediately. But I think what you say is probably the first step of trying to get control at that time.
Absolutely. Mirroring what both Jeremy said, getting control. And then if obviously can't, you letting our office know.
That's it for now, Jeremy. If you want to go ahead and continue with, I believe coaches was the next part of it.
Yes. So the coaches will be a little bit more in depth here, guys. Obviously, we talked about parents. We don't have the direct authority that falls on the administrator. However, when we get back to coaches, they're a match participant. Like I said, we have complete authority in this matter to unsportsmanlike conduct, to hostile behavior, to enforcing the expectations that we hold on the match. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So we deal with a lot more, I think, coach situations where we have some questionable behavior on how to handle things. To me, dealing with upset coaches all starts with preventative officiating. Not trying to toot my own horn by any means. I have a lot to learn as an official and a lot I can still perfect and do differently. But I found that if I take a preventative approach to dealing with upset coaches, I have far less upset coaches to deal with. So we'll start with when we're entering the gym for pre-match. When we get in the gym, our authority starts to an extent as we come in, as far as enforcing sportsmanship, enforcing behavior, things like that. Greet all of your coaches the same. I have been fishing volleyball for a decade now. There are coaches who I have been coaching for 10 years, and there's coaches that when I walk in the gym, it's the first time I've ever met them. I've officiated some of these coaches in club. I've seen some of them in college theaters. So just because I know them, I want to make sure everybody's the same. The thing I tell my officials, hey, you might hug that coach if you saw them at Walmart, or they might want to hug you. But if you're not going to hug every single coach that our association covers, don't hug any of them in the gym. The last thing you want to do is give an impression to the other team that you have a favorite or you have a relationship, and it's going to affect their chances that night to compete in the match. So remain impartial. If you put them off right when you walk into the gym by hugging the other coach, you're much more likely to have an upset coach with you that night. If you're going to have conversations, I know some coaches want to come up and talk your ear off about everything from, what's going on in professional sports to how your job going, because they do know you, things like that. And other coaches don't want to talk to you. They're focused on prepping for that night. My recommendation, if a coach is going to try and have a long conversation with you, or you really need to ask some information from the coach, have that conversation in front of your scorer's table. If you set up shop in front of a team's bench, that's kind of a no-go for the other team's coach. They don't always feel empowered to walk across the net, past the scorer's table to the other team's bench to join your conversation or find out what you're talking about, why you might be laughing a little bit. But if you're talking in front of the scorer's table, they can come up and join that conversation or send someone to hear what you're saying and understand that where you're coming from is, friendly, not overly friendly or overly personal, which gets me to controversial topics. There are things that I recommend my officials do not talk about with coaches when you're in the gym in uniform. Don't talk about the official that was there the night before from your association. If they want to say, man, that guy was horrible, they sucked, just say, hey, it's really not the time and place for me to discuss. It's not my position. As my officials, I like to remind them, unless you are the assigner or you're involved in, ratings and trainings of officials, try and stay out of those conversations, period. And even if you are in one of those groups, let them know, hey, there's a way to talk about this after the fact. We can have a phone conversation. We can email. That's what I try and do with my coaches. Understand your concerns, but here's not the place. Don't talk about other teams. Don't do anything that could give someone a scouting report. They're asking you, oh, you officiated the number one team in the district. What you can tell me about them? You start giving, even if no one's offended that night, but you start telling them about the hitting schemes they're running and their defenses. You're creating an unfair advantage that, could be a problem next time you do see that team that you just scouted for this coach. Let them do that on their own time. Just in general, whether I'm at my day job or here, I tell people, don't talk about politics when you're in a uniform on the clock, anything, politics, religion, the big no's that we all joke about in society. Let's not risk sparking a conversation with someone that's going to risk some confrontation there. I'll stop the rambling on that point there. So set your expectations with your coaches in our pre-match meetings. We get given a card by the FHSA, which is great guidelines. I've morphed that into my own, but make sure we're communicating what we want to see out of the coaches. As far as coaches' communications, I always remind them, coaches, if you have questions, you're going to go to my R2. You're going to talk to them. You're not going to yell across the court. If you would like, you can send your captain to talk to me as the R1, and we'll talk to the captain, but I'm going to talk to the captain. So I let them know how we're going to communicate. Remind them that in the theater of the high school athletic association and the NFHS, we're only able to talk to the head coaches about what's going on in the match. We can't engage the assistants. So I let them know what we're going to talk and who we're going to talk to. I always mention sportsmanship to my coaches and my players. I set my expectations. We're not going to talk across the net. We're going to talk to our team. If we have problems across the net, don't deal with it yourself. We're not outlaws. We're not vigilantes here. Come to an official and we'll put a stop to it. Big thing I also let them know that I consider sportsmanship is you're not going to talk to my line judges. Yes, the host school provided them, but they're part of my officiating crew. And I can't have players on the bench from varsity joking with the JV player throughout the match, potentially saying things that might influence them or, cause them to change a point. I need them to remain neutral and biased. So please don't talk to them. If you set your expectations, it's a lot easier to manage them throughout the match. The coaches know what to expect. It builds you a sense of credibility. If you also keep on your pre-match activities, so if you make sure they're bringing their rosters to you when you start your pre-match, you make sure your lineups are in at 2 minutes. You make sure if you've promised them a 1 minute warning, make sure you do that. I know some associations do that as a standard. I've heard that they always give their teams a 1 minute warning after they're towards the end of their 7 minutes. In my association, we'll give it if it's asked of the coach, but we don't just step out and do it. So if you're going to, offer them assistance like that, make sure you follow through. You don't want to start by, breaking your word, so to speak, and putting a tone with them. So kind of where we've gone here, we've worked our way up to the match with setting a good relationship. So really where we run afoul of upset coaches, I find, is during the match. So let's talk about some of that. First and foremost, if you follow those communication expectations, it goes a long way. Coach's reaction, you make a call they don't like, don't make a call. Come on, ref, that's a double, that's a double, that's a lift. They're yelling across the court to you. Is the R1, if I start having to coach you that, first thing I do, I just give an open hand gesture back to my R2, just remind them, you're going to need to go to hand. I'm not going to yell across them. I'm not going to engage them. And that'll help remind them, go to my R2. I remind my R2, hey, when they start doing that, my expectation is that you serve and protect from the R2 position. You're going to serve that coach as a point of communication, and you're going to protect me from getting yelled at across the court. So if we get them from rally number 1, rally number 10, whenever that first comment is going to the R2, we keep them from yelling across the court, raising their voice, which leads to continued voice raising there. But, if I turn around and start yelling across the court at the coach, why are they ever going to not yell at me? Because, I've opened the door, so they're invited to walk through at that point. So if we follow our expectations on our part, they will normally follow them as well, or at least we can, have justification when we need to discipline of some degree to get them to follow those. Because you got to keep in mind here too, we're talking about upset coaches. Do not misconstrue passion for anger or frustration with you. These coaches are paid to coach their team. They are with their players, 5-6 nights a week. They are looking at the game with rose-colored glasses. And in all honesty, guys, they should be doing that. That's their job. So of course, when something doesn't go their way, they're looking at it from a 45 to 65 degree angle from where they're standing on the net. They don't have a great view. They have an internal bias, even if they're trying to fight it. We got to recognize that. So come on, ref, that was a net. That was a net. It might come out fast. It might come out loud. Might not be anger. Keep in mind passion. Try and work with them to get through things here. If you fire back from a really defensive standpoint versus just a place of trying to relay information and understanding, it could lead to a more tense situation. Keep in mind, coaches have tactics on these things too. Sometimes they will intentionally test your knowledge. Like, that was a back row. Where did he come off of? He wasn't behind the line. They'll ask you questions trying to make you explain the rules so they can understand your knowledge, see what they might be able to get away with. I can tell you, I don't have much coaching experience, but when I do, if I know an official is not having back row awareness and is going to potentially let my back row setter dump the ball all night, why wouldn't I take advantage of that? It's coaching smarts. It gets me a skill. And if you're not going to call it, I'm going to test and find out what you're going to do. So they will test you. So be prepared for that. Also be prepared that sometimes coaches will intentionally get carded. It might sound crazy, but as a player, seeing your coach get carded, seeing them fight for you at a very tense point of the match can really get you going and affect momentum. So recognize that with coaches. If a coach comes at you really hot out of somewhere at the end of the 4th set when they're 5 points down on an elimination set for them, see where they're coming from rather than let them scream at you for, 30 seconds. If it's, warranted of a card, don't be hesitant to give it, because sometimes that card will get them to stop because they're not wanting further sanctions, or that's just what they wanted. So keep in mind, they're not always trying to get carded, but sometimes it does happen. One thing I like to say too is when you get questions or you get objections from coaches, you want to address these concerns quickly, and you want to address these concerns quickly. What I mean by this is rallies going on, coach starts yelling for a back row attack. You and your partner had the player behind the line, so all is good. Coach, back row, that's back row. They were back row. They're going, keep repeating, trying to get you to think on it. Is an R2, I'll keep my eyes on the net, but I will speak loud enough the coach can hear and say, Coach, we had him behind the line. That was not a back row. I'll let them know right away. I found that by doing this, the coach gets their answer, or at least they get an answer that will let them focus on the match and stop yelling at me and my partner and distracting the game and potentially throwing us off. So don't be afraid to answer that question really quick mid-rally. Also say it in as few words as possible. Coach, they weren't back row. Don't try and explain the whole rule verbatim. Don't try and tell them their foot was 6 inches behind the line. They were above, coach, but because they were back, you keep going like that, you're going to get lost in your officiating duties, and it's not going to get it through. So answer questions quickly, and quickly I found gets them what they want. They want to be heard. They want recognition they've been heard in that situation too. So that'll bring me to the next point. So we've addressed it quickly during the play. Once it's over, if I've had a coach ask a question and I've addressed it or have not addressed it mid-rally, as soon as I finish signaling, we give the fault, I'm going straight to the coach who just lost the point that had the concern, and I'm going to talk to him. Say, hey, coach, I understand you had a question about our back row. Here's what we had. Really quick, address it. Let them know I heard you, and I'm going to respond to it as soon as I can. Lets them know you're paying attention and you're on it. even if I have a rally, I don't feel I had an immediate concern from a coach. The first thing I do, again, we've just signaled the end of a point here. I check both my coaches. I see if they're looking at me for information. I try and judge their body language. Do they seem tense? Do they seem angry? Was there anything that I might need to clarify? I'm not going to go up and just start informing them about the game. They know what's going on. But if they're looking at me confused or anything, or I know there was a question they might have had, I'm already there giving them eye contact, letting them know, hey, if you have a question, feel free to come in. It lets them know as an R2 as well that you're paying attention to them. They're more likely to come to you like we want than to yell across the court to the R1, because they can get eye contact with the R1 because they're staring at them. But if the R2's head is just focused straight ahead and all they see is your profile, that's not very engaging. It's not inviting. That's when they're going to start, ramping up to other means to get attention, getting loud, getting upset. So if we're serving them the whole time, giving them an avenue to talk to, they're much more likely to speak with us. That being said, even if you are serving them, they might want to yell, they might want to get loud. I was officiating for an official who actually works for my association. He's a great college official, but I was doing lines for him in a collegiate tournament, and he was the down ref. I was on his side as the line judge. He's serving, he's protecting, he's talking to him. He gives the coach eye contact, and the coach storms over, instantly yelling. He says, no, coach, hold on. If you want to talk to me about what just happened, I'm happy to talk to you. But if you're just going to come yell at me about things, we're going to play volleyball. Coach kept yelling, so I said, okay, coach. And he gave the court back to the R1, and they went on. After the next rally, he turned back to the coach and said, coach, you ready to talk about that? And the coach came over, and they had a conversation. Now, I can tell you I've had bad success with that tactic. It's not the tactic I'm trying to teach, but just the fact, set your expectations with your coach, give them the time of day, and you're going to have some better results as far as dealing with anger. You don't always have to respond in a way to let coaches know they've been heard. Sometimes they just want to be heard. Come on, I don't see how that's not a net. The net's been shaking all night. You guys aren't calling anything. It's just they're all over the net all night. Come on. Okay, coach, I've heard you. I'll use that line a lot. Okay, coach, I understand. Okay, coach, I've heard you. Just let's know, I've heard your comment. I don't really have anything to share. I'm not going to tell my varsity coach in a competitive match, well, I'm not going to quote him the rule. He knows that. So if there's no facts, there's no justification needed, just a simple, okay, coach, I understand. Let them know, I've heard you. You've been heard. And, I'm sure you can tell as a person when you work your job, when you do whatever, if you don't feel like you're heard, you get frustrated. But if you can give somebody that personal touch relationship, hey, I've heard you, you stay calm a little bit better. When you do go to explain something to them, always remember you were explaining what you saw. When we officiate, we talk about we have judgment calls. We only can call what we see. So what we see is our call. We hope it's the right call. We hope it's fact, but it may not be. So I always try my best, I should say, when I approach coaches, say, coach, on that play, I saw the player's foot on the line and they attacked the ball from above the height of the net. So I had a back row on that one. I'm not going to say, coach, it was back row. His foot was definitely on the line, because your coaches. They'll turn right back around to the player. Hey, were you in the net? They weren't in the net. You just said they were. You're telling me my player lied? No. So I approach it, coach, I saw number 9 in the net. He says he wasn't. Coach, I saw number 9. I have to go with what I saw. I'm not telling the coach he's wrong. I'm not telling him his player's wrong. I'm just telling what I saw. Hopefully, I've demonstrated enough throughout the match that they can respect my opinion and what I saw and recognize, I am human. Maybe I made a mistake, but I'm trying to go with what I saw, which is all they can ask for. So as the R2, we're often trying to respond and talk to coaches about calls that our R1 is made. And if we're doing our job watching the net, maybe we didn't see that double that happened at the back of the court, or we didn't see the carried ball that the player's back was to us. So if you don't have an answer for the coach, don't make it up. If you have you saw it out of your peripheral, you saw what was going on based on the ref's call, you know what to do, talk to them about it. But if you need clarification, don't be afraid to get it. I'll ask my coach when they come to me about, a rules call that my R1 made, and I don't have the answer because it was not in my vision. I'll say, coach, I didn't see that play specifically. Some version of wording to say, coach, let's get some clarification from the R1 to help us out here. Can you send your captain? Have them send their captain. Or I might just say, hold on, coach, I'd like to talk to my partner, depending on their attitude, how it goes. Request permission to go speak to them at the stand and talk it through with my partner. That way we're getting their word into the situation. I'm not putting words into their mouth that, aren't appropriate, that could affect, how the match goes from there. So don't be afraid to get clarity. On the same note, you don't want to run across the court, 6 times every set, because then your credibility as an R2 is shot. You don't know what's going on. Every now and then, if you have to do it, that's okay, because the coach wants the right call and the right answer, and seeing you guys work as a team is beneficial to that for sure. So when coaches start commenting on the match, we've talked a lot about things to prevent this, but they are making comments. They are saying things. Where is the line of acceptable versus things that are not acceptable? So coaches are allowed to comment on the match, in my opinion. If they make the comment, come on, that wasn't a net, they're having some reaction to what they see. They have an opinion, just like I have an opinion, and they've said it. There's nothing wrong. Come on, ref, he wasn't in the net. It's not a blatant question of my judgment. To me, that's an opinion that they're stating to let off some steam. So, okay, you've said that. I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to let it off. Now, if they start becoming verbally abusive to you about it, come on, ref, how are you not seeing these nets? Are you blind? They've gotten aggressive. They've gotten hostile. They're clearly upset and trying to take anger on me. I will give one warning to each coach in a match. Coach, we're not going to go there. This isn't personal. We're not going to make personal comments. We're not going to say things like that. I've had coaches make comments. Does your partner even know what sport this is? Because I'm working with a junior official, and it's the JV match or freshman match, and they're up. Coach, we're not going to attack people like that. We're not going to go there. If you have comments about the match or questions on rules, I'm happy to hear it. But this is not going to become personal. If they keep it up, I'm going to go right to a yellow card. I'm not going to create an environment on that night, as well as all the nights forward, where the coach feels like they can make these comments. We work with the same coaches. If you as an official or even your association gets the reputation that coaches can run all over you, your job as an officiating association and as an official got a lot harder. So if we're consistent on our expectations, and we try and preach this to our officials here in Orlando, do not take consistent verbal abuse. Get carded, like I said, before you get angry, before that situation happens. I had a coach once make a comment, got that girl on the stand. She doesn't know what she's doing at all. She has no business being there. I told him, Coach, we're not going to mention that again. He made a similar comment on the next rally. I requested a yellow card as an R2. We have to protect our up officials, and we have to protect ourselves as well as the down official. And if you hear that when you're on the stand, take similar action. Notify your captain. Let your coach know we're not going to hear that. Or issue the sanction if it's warranted. There are offenses that don't warrant a caution. It could be so offensive, dropping profanity about you. You don't have to know what you're doing out here, ref. I'm going to go straight to a yellow card, if not a red, depending on the situation with a comment like that. Be mindful. And again, don't be afraid to card before you get angry. Understand the consequences, which we'll talk about in a bit for sanctions, but be ready and prepared to use those. Again, I'm going to come back to only the officiating crew talks to the line judge. Pet peeve of mine, if a coach starts yelling at a line judge from 6 feet away, I've got an adult yelling at a 15-year-old kid, that strikes a chord with me that I'm not comfortable with. Put a stop to that immediately. Let that expectation known to your line judges when you start working with them. Hey, if a player or a coach yells at you, instantly walk away from your corner. I'd rather you miss a call. Come to my stand. Let me know who said what, and I'm going to deal with that for you. Protect them. They're in a vulnerable spot. Make sure only we are talking to our line judges. Once the host school gives them to us to work with us, they can't replace them. We can replace them. They're ours. So make sure we're controlling any anger towards them and redirect it back to us so that we can deal with it, because the line judge doesn't have that power or authority. All right. So we talked about some mid-match stuff. I'm sure there's going to be questions. I'd like to have some open discussion on that here at the end. So we'll jump into some post-match stuff. So your authority, I keep talking about our authority in the match a little bit. Our authority lasts until we sign the scorebook. What I mean by it, you can issue sanctions after that last point's awarded. I, try not to give Robbie and Jeremy an impression that I'm overly strict on things, throwing out entire student section stuff, but I've given cards, both yellow and red, at the close of a match. I've awarded that 15th point in the 5th set, or maybe it was the 16th or 17th, and I have a senior come up to me who's just been eliminated from playoffs, and he's going to let me have it. And whatever comes out of his mouth, I've issued yellows, I've issued reds for these things. You might ask, why is that worth it? His season's over. What's he going to miss? It's still, you're protecting yourself. You're setting a tone. You need to remember where your authority lasts. And that really goes for the coaches too, because that's who we're really trying to keep in line. If you keep your coach in line, your players stay in line a lot. So know that we have authority up until that book is signed, and continue to use it. Don't feel like, oh, I called the last point, now they can abuse me all they want here. Again, we're the only impartial people in the gym. We also don't have a crowd that's ready to support us and parents. So if things turn on us, that's why we want to make sure we're on top of our behavioral management, because it's just you and your partner, and you're hoping that somebody else might protect you if something goes crazy. So let's not get there. So if you know things are going south with coaches, just like you see them going south with a spectator, call your administrator over mid-match. Let them know, hey, as soon as I'm getting off the stand, please walk me across the court. We're going to grab my partner. We're going to do what I like to call a toot and scoot. We're going to grab our equipment, and we're going to leave the gym immediately. Not going to hang around by the table where the coach feels like they can come up and ask me 10,000 questions and give me 10,000 comments. So have your game plan, your exit strategy ready. If you've ejected anybody, a coach, a parent, a player, make sure that administrator knows that they're walking you not just out of the gym, but to your car that night. Both of you guys. If I have to walk across the parking lot with my partner to their car and the administrator, and then go the full length back to mine, I'm going to do that to make sure they're getting home safe that night. Make sure you have your plan. Administrators might not like it, but it's the safe thing to do. If you've thrown somebody out, tempers were hot, and they're only going to get hotter. They're looking for their win in the situation, and you've just removed them from the gym. So their win might be trying to say something to you or do something to you after the match. Make sure you have your game plan and your protection there. If they are coming up to you at the table trying to discuss what's going on, avoid talking to them about calls. This is another no-win situation for you when they start trying to come up and talk to you at the table. I got two situations here. I was working with a partner once. He was up for JV. I was down. The JV coach was all over him and really mad. He felt, okay, we're sitting back behind waiting for varsity to start. It's done. We're between matches. He felt his authority had expired. Once we signed the JV book, in my mind, we're now on varsity time. Well, the JV coach who lost came up and was just letting him have it. I'd gone to get a water, so by the time I'm getting back, he'd been getting screamed at for 3 minutes. I reminded the assistant coach, I said, Coach, you're clearly unhappy. You need to walk away because we're in the varsity match. It'd be a shame if I have to notify your coach that you've gotten yourself ejected for an unsportsmanlike conduct call, and they're going to be sitting the entire varsity match. So keep in mind, your authority is still there at that point. You've entered a new match, and so you still have that capability to do so. Don't let yourself get abused. At the end of a varsity match, I've had it, the coach wanted to come up. You got to tell me, ref, what was going on with that back row call? What were you talking about with your judgment? It was all over the place. It was terrible. It's a no-win situation to answer that question. If you tell them, well, coach, here's what I was seeing with my judgment. I think I was correct on the back row calls. They're already mad at you at the call. You reaffirming your call changes nothing. They're going to stay mad at you, and they're going to try and change your mind and tell you why you're wrong. You can't win in that situation. On the inverse side, say, you know what, coach, I've thought about it. You're right. My judgment was terrible tonight. It was all over the place. I just didn't have a good match. They don't want to hear your excuse, as they'll see it, whether it's an apology or not. They're going to say, well, your terrible decisions have cost me the match, and now you've blown your credibility with this coach going forward. So if I have a coach come up to me and want to talk about match stuff after the fact, disgruntled with my calls, I just notify my coach, look, we heard your comments throughout the match. I've heard what you say right here. We're not going to continue going with it. My partner and I will discuss it in our post-initial matchup, but it's really not something I can discuss with you. Thanks for your comments and have a good night. And I separate myself and I try and move on. Kill them with kindness if you have to make comments to them, but don't engage. It's not a situation you can win, in my experience. So kind of in wrap up here before we jump into some questions that I'm sure have come in, do your best to stay calm. Kill people with kindness, come from the right mentality with them, and you're going to do a lot better. A smile goes a long way. Try and understand where they're coming from. If you're approaching everything from I am right on everything I'm doing and the coaches are wrong, they have no right to question me, you're in for a rough night because that perception is going to show off to the coach. If you try and understand where they're coming from and empathize with people, it's a lot easier to deal with people. You can anticipate their responses and stay one step ahead of them. Know and use your resources in the gym. This comes back to your administrators. Know who's on your team, know who you can ask to use and who you can rely on and what they can do for you. Know the consequences of your discipline. Obviously, we're talking about upset coaches. You're going to have to give verbal warnings. You're going to have to give cards, whether they're delay penalties or they're unsportsmanlike sanctions. know what happens with each of those. That's going to be especially important going into this season. The FHSAA is removing their unsportsmanlike conduct section, and we're now going to use the conduct section from the NFHS. So that's going to change some things. A yellow card for unsportsmanlike conduct is still going to sit your coach down, whether you've given that to the head coach, an assistant coach, or a bench member. So if you give a yellow card, you're sitting the coach down. I don't say that to try and keep you from doing it, but understand what it's going to do and the response you might get from the coach so you're prepared to handle it. A red card now is a penalty point, but the coach isn't removed from the gym. You remove the coach when you show both cards at the same time now under the NFHS, and that's called a disqualification. Make sure you guys read that section, talk through it as your officiating group. We may even do a webinar series on that going on because that is going to be a rule change, so it might fall into play if we continue to have interest in these, which I think we've had a good turnout tonight, so I'm definitely interested in seeing some more of these from my association and from some of you guys out there too, maybe. So at this point, guys, Robbie, Jeremy, what kind of questions have we had flow in?
So there was one from the first couple with the students, parents portion. How do you feel about home student sections following the visitor team from side to side?
I don't like it when I see them following the visitor team from side to side. Like I said, I don't like it. That comes up to the administrator, though. I can bring that up to the administrator and say, hey, can you keep them in one spot? And they're going to have a yes or no answer for you. If they say no, then you have to decide how serious are the comments they're making, how serious is the behavior that they're exhibiting. If it's hostile, if it's unsportsmanlike, then that's when you put your foot down to the administrator and say, look, to me, this is what I'm seeing and why I'm seeing it. I'm going to have to request that you stop it, or I may have to declare this match an unsafe playing area. But if you're just seeing it as, it's not unsportsmanlike, it's giving some home field advantage. We're not here to stop home field advantage. That's a natural part of the game. It may be something that you allow. It's going to depend on the night. Again, personally, I try and stop it when I see it because usually the teams that are doing that, in my experience, are the teams that are going to make comments directed at players that are going to make unsportsmanlike comments. So they typically go hand in hand in my experience, but I suppose you can see a peaceful student section, so to speak, that's just doing the standard volleyball cheers, that's just wanting to move with the other team to make some noise so that they can't communicate on the court. And, I hate to say it, but that's not, in my mind, something that should be stopped. But like I said, I've never directly seen that myself.
All right, Jeremy, you want me to jump in on a couple of these questions up here on the chat?
Yeah, that'll work. And I think to add on what Jeremy was saying, if you see schools who are continually doing that and they are getting kind of borderline, possibly in a couple weeks or depending on who the team is, feel free to reach out to Robbie and I. Let us know. If we don't know what's going on around the state with your teams and those that you cover, we can't address that with the athletic directors and the head coaches. So if you have a feeling that there may be a tense game, a tense match coming up, and this school has been doing it for the last few, and it may cause sparks just because of that rivalry or something like that, feel free to reach out, have your president, your booking commissioner reach out to Robbie or myself, and that way we can nip it in the butt before that game ever happens, and that even is an opportunity for it to take place.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to us. I know we've had a couple of those instances that during the state series that we've had to reach out and actually had conversations with the athletic director and the actual principal about gym setup and things like that. So we're here to assist any way we can. All right. Our first question in the chat for you, Jeremy. Some coaches look to R1 because they may not want to address R2 to intentionally slow match, or because they think R2 is new or not knowledgeable. What is the best way to get R2 to take control?
So the best way, in that situation, clearly the coach doesn't like the communication structure. They don't know the person. They don't have faith in them. Is the R1 don't engage, continue to redirect. I've had coaches do what you're talking about. Literally, I've beginning of the season got a brand new official out there down on the down ref spot, and the coach knows it. They can feel it. They don't want to deal with them. If the coach isn't taking my cues, you got to talk to them. You got to talk to them. I'm not dealing with it. I'll call my captain over, because I can talk to my captain and say, look, please remind your coach they have to go to the R2. I understand, their frustration or whatever, but they've got to talk to the R2. We're going to get through it. They may not like it, but usually at a certain point they're gonna get there. I know it might slow the match down, might cause some impact, but if we continue to break the rule and let them yell across the court, we're never gonna have our R2 or ourselves learn as an R2 to efficiently deal with that situation. We got to make sure they're going through that communication though.
All right, next question. What about coaches that insist you give them a player number who was in the net? However, you can't see player number at all times. I say, and this is coming from Jess Molinex up in Tallahassee, I say outside or middle blocker. Is that fine?
Yeah, Jess, that's a great question, and that's a great response in my opinion. I do that personally a lot. If everybody's skin tone is the same and you got 6 to 8 sets of hands right there around the net, and bam, the ball comes off or someone's arms in the net, and you're trying to figure out who that fault was on. First thing I'll do if I'm not sure, I'll try and cue in on the players' faces as they come down. If it was a net, they might make a grimace that might tip me off as to who did it, give me some support there. But if I'm really just having to guess and I don't have a number, I'll come right up to the coach in that situation. Coach, I had the middle blocker, because I haven't had time to find their number. I just had a hand. I'll even, sometimes you got to go to a coach. You weren't sure. I saw an arm in the net. I don't know who it belonged to. So I come down, coach, I had a net. Okay, well, who was it on? Coach, I'm not sure, but I had an arm in the net. That's what I saw. They can keep coming back, say, you got to tell me, or you can't make the call without it. It's a quick response for me. Coach, I can make the call. I'm not required to have a number. Just let them know the state. Obviously, try and give them what you can. So if you've got middle blocker, right side, libero, whoever you've got in the net, go on and give them that position. But don't be afraid to, if all you got is, coach, I had an arm. I've told a coach before, because especially in girls' season, they're wearing long sleeves. So regardless of their skin tone, I got nothing to match back up to a face or to a position or something. I've told a coach that. Well, how can you call it if you don't know who is in it? Coach, I'm looking at arms going into a net and they're all wearing identical black sleeves. I couldn't determine on that one, but I did have an arm. At that point, if they're really going to persist with you, my true answer to you is, at that point, they're questioning your judgment. They're questioning your credibility as an official. You're moving out of a rules question into a judgment or into an unsportsmanlike area if they're really going to get overly tight about it. So you might have to proceed down a different path.
All right. I believe Jose may be referencing this to myself and Jeremy Hernandez. What happens to a coach or a player if you give them a red card after the match is finished? So Wiggins, this may, if you're giving a red card for unsportsmanlike conduct post-match.
So I'll speak from the official side of it, and eventually it's going to turn over to you guys, just like any red card thing will. So if you issue a red card after the match, what I've done, first, it's going to go in the book, just like anything else. So in your comment sections, you're going to write red card to number 1 at 25-14 of set 3. So that's the score. That's where it goes in here. Obviously, there's no ejection, disqualification, the match is done, but it is sanctioning that goes in. So at this point, I'm going to report that to my sport director, whatever you call them in your association that you need to let know. There's paperwork we're required to do as officials, because anything where you're ejecting and disqualifying, and since we're going to a new rule, I'm gonna have to learn the process myself, with whether the paperwork happens at a red card now or a disqualification, ejection of both cards coming out. We'll have to figure that out, but we'll definitely get you guys feedback on that. But when the paperwork is required, after the match, you've disqualified somebody, you got to let the FHSAA know, because like they were saying, in order to keep a problem becoming pervasive, you got to inform them. So you make the comment in your book, you notify your association, you do your write-up when you get home that night or in the next morning. If you're not getting home till 11 o'clock, which can happen, get it to Robbie and Jeremy within 24 hours so that they can look at the situation, because there could be suspensions or fines involved going back to the schools.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. We actually shared with the volleyball presidents over the weekend. And Jeremy, if you want to jump in on this about our corrective action team that we have at the office, when you're filing AT6s, make sure they're clear and concise, because we do have a team that reviews them. And not only is the official submitting those now, the schools are as well. So basically, so we got both sides of what is actually going on. And then our team does sit down. I'm part of that team. Jeremy actually coordinates it as the team. And we sit down as part of our operations committee at the FHSA and review every AT6 that comes into our office. Jeremy, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and just like Robbie was saying, be concise, know what you saw, speak to your partner, get any additional information from your partner, because not only are the schools submitting a written version of it, there's the ability for them to submit videos or comments from any of their admin staff. So just be concise, be clear with what happened, because at the end of the day, if they send a video and it's something completely different, it's never a good look for FHSA or for the association who submitted that. So just making sure it's clear, concise, and what actually happened, and that will go a long way with helping us make sure the right sanction and penalty is handed out to the schools.
Absolutely. We've got a couple more here, and we know your time is valuable, so we'll finish up here. I know we're just over an hour. Carl mentioned, going back to the question someone had on the assistant AD getting on a ref. The ref can eject any school admin from the match and write an AT6, and that person will be sanctioned as well. Absolutely. We've sanctioned athletic directors, coaches, and I believe there's even been assistant principals that have received AT6s through our office. And then last but not least, Jessica thought the rule change was that the yellow card did not require a coach to sit if handed the coach, assistant coach, or bench. That is 12-2-6. Jess answered that as well. So I believe that's it. Jeremy Hernandez or Jeremy Wiggins, do you all have anything as a follow-up?
Yeah, just one thing I'll add on the AT6 thing. One, I'm actually happy to hear that you guys are having the schools issue their report as well. Both sides of that, I think, is best. One thing that I push with my association is we're dealing with AT6s is you guys mentioned, as the official who issued the conduct, talking to your partner. I actually have both of my officials issue an AT6. I have them both fill out from their perspective. That way, if the partner doesn't feel that the official had the proper action, or at the very least that the official issuing the conduct is not misconstruing the other person's perspective, it just gives the FHSA more tools. So I recommend 2 AT6s. More information to these guys can only help them do their job properly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Looks like we might have a couple other ones. Do the webinars count as required meetings? As of right now, we're not, FHSA side, we're not doing anything on our part, as this is kind of new going through this whole process. However, if your associations are going to count them, we have nothing against that. If they want to help you count those towards your meeting totals, these are just additional that we were trying to get off the ground and see how they go moving forward, and possibly doing more and more next year and things like that. So as of right now, there's nothing from our end, but again, we've left that up to associations if they want to be able to do that. Other than that, we thank everyone for joining us tonight. We look forward to having more of these. Hopefully Jeremy can jump on and we can get the yellow card, red card, new things straightened out, because there were a few questions on that. Maybe we'll have one just specifically on that.
Yeah.
I am talking, just kind of heads up to everyone else, I am talking with Jessica Molinix from Tallahassee. We're planning one for next Tuesday at 6 from her group, game management of the R2 and R1 of their duties. So once we get that finalized and set up, please look out for an email for that to get pre-registered and join if you're available. But other than that, we hope you guys stay safe, and we'll be back at it next week or sometime in the future if it doesn't turn out for next week. So thank you, and have a good rest of the night, guys.
Thank you all. Take
Have
care.
a good night, guys. Thanks for having me on.